We will call the meeting of this evening to order. The City of Riviera Beach City Council Budget Workshop, September 2nd, 6:08 p.m. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Ronnie Felder.
Here.
Council Chairperson Shirley Lanier.
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Kashamba Miller Anderson. Councilperson Trodrick McCoy.
Here.
Councilperson Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Councilperson Julia Botel.
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans.
Present.
City Clerk Claudine Anthony is present. City Attorney Don Nguyen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We will have a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Lawson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will have the introduction and purpose. Mr. Evans.
Madam Chair and members of the board, this evening's presentation is the last presentation related to the budget workshop activities. So we will be going over the 5-year capital improvements plan, and in the 5-year capital improvements plan, incorporated in the fiscal year 2022 budget is a fully funded capital budget. So all the projects that are discussed that are slated for 2022, there is monies in the budget for that. The items that are in the out years, there's no funding that has been appropriated for those particular projects. So in your budget document, the only living, breathing component of your capital budget is the year in which the budget cycle is in. We will also talk about some other items that are contained in the budget regarding the centennial celebration and some other monies that have been set aside for activities related to professional services. And then we will get into a more specific conversation as it relates to compensation and wages as it relates to your Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees, which are your non-represented. So with that being said, Madam Chair, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our Finance Director, Mr. Randy Sherman, to walk us through the capital improvements plan, and departments are here to answer any questions that may come up as a result of the capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Good evening, Randy Sherman, Director of Finance and Administrative Services. I know the presentation looks large, there's a lot of pages. I will not read every line on here. I made a presentation on the capital plan back in August, so I will again just point out the new projects, because many of the projects are carry forwards, and then those projects that I think may be of specific interest to the council. Okay, so the first projects up are those that are assigned to city administration. Again, these are repeat projects from the past. I will point out that the City Hall replacement, this is the 1-cent surtax that we have under here. We did hold the first oversight committee meeting last week, so the committee has been engaged and they're ready to go. They're on that project once the city starts moving and spending those dollars. The second set of projects are for development services. Again, the top project, neighborhood revitalization, that's the new project that Ms. McBride is leading. She has some wonderful ideas and plans on that, and we set aside $1 million next year to kick off that project. The next 3 line items there are all Singer Island Dune restoration. They're just different years. The dollar's been open. It was a 10-year agreement with the county. We were to set aside $500,000 per year. Some years we spend it, some years we don't. We actually just received an invoice this week for $364,000 that'll be charged to these projects. This contract actually expires next year, but I would, be thinking that the county will now be, submitting a new agreement for the next 10 years. Then we have the fire capital projects. I will point out that in 2022, we are funding the self-contained breathing apparatus. That's the scuba gear that the firefighters wear for, get oxygen. 2023 is the cardiac monitor devices, so those are now funded in here. And obviously we have Station 86 and 88. I will point out that you'll see there's 2 Fire Station 88s. Initially, we were providing some cash to kick that project off. If you recall, back in May, you approved the ability for us to go back and back charge the bonds for any eligible costs that we could do. So as we get into the year end, we will be making that adjustment, and then we'll actually be closing out the 18 project. And those funds can then be used for some other capital project. Information technology, again, just to give you a little history on this one, back in 2015, the city did a master plan for IT. It was estimated to be about a $7 million plan, and it covered everything from hardware, the ERP system, and, anything, again, laptops, desktops, libraries, book check-in and check-out. It was a very comprehensive system. So what you see up here are the last 3 years of that plan. And then again, that'll have been 10 years since that IT master plan had been developed. And at that point, city should probably consider the next IT master plan, so we know where technology is going. And other things such as the ongoing maintenance fee of software such as Tyler should really be in the operating budget and not in the capital plan.
So when is the ending date for the current IT master plan?
2024 would be the last year.
Okay.
Parks and Recreation. I will point out up here on the bottom line is the Parks Master Plan. As you know, they have gone through, they've studied, and they're coming up with that master plan. What we have then done is budgeted $500,000 per year for the next 5 years to start the implementation of that master plan. We don't want to do a study and then just have it sit on the shelf, so we're funding that going out. We also have some beach renovation dollars from impact fees that we have plugged in here. That can be used for beach access, can be used, also, depending on what happens with 86, if you're moving, things around. We just thought we would put some dollars in here that would be appropriated should they be needed. The police capital plan, the top line item is a new item that was not in the August presentation. The police department is in need of replacing their radios, their 800 megahertz radios. We did it, I want to say again, about 5 or 6 years ago, so you're in that life cycle, so we've added those dollars in. And then again, there's a few dollars left under their body camera line item. But again, the police technology enhancements, that's the camera systems. So again, you just see multiple years of funding that are still out there. We don't close that out. We allow them to continue to use those dollars. The Public Works budget, there are a couple of new projects, again, that were not on here in August. The top line, the bus shelters. The city and the county are looking at, putting some bus shelters at our bus stops. The third line down is citywide striping. Again, it's been in the plan for a few years, just unfunded, and we're bringing that forward and actually putting some money in here. We continue with the municipal facilities and some cash funding to go along with the dollars that I spoke about earlier with the penny surtax. We still have one neighborhood district funds left of $186,000. District 3 transfer their money into the new program for the facilities, for the properties. The last item I guess I will point out here is the bottom line. Last night you spoke about 13th Street and the Rotary, and again I want to point out that we have typically funded $50,000 in the traffic calming line item. We have $100,000 in there for next year just to make sure that we have sufficient dollars to do that project.
And does that include the other projects that we talked about last night?
Yes, and again, you can see there's a little bit of, there's $54,000 left carried over from the prior year. But again, that 100,000 should hopefully get us through everything that Mr. Bailey was speaking to last night.
So why is it saying gas tax when the money was from UPS?
Well, this is what we're putting in, so this does not even count UPS's contribution. Yeah, and we do fund it through the gas tax revenues. Additional public works projects. These are all the street projects that Public Works has submitted that have no funding. Okay, I know that it says in progress for 34th and 35th Streets. That project, if you remember, was actually in last year's capital plan, and then the CDBG dollars were reprogrammed. So that project, in essence, is alive, but at this point, it has no funding. So again, if you look at this, you know, we have spoken to Public Works. We're looking to maybe be able to get $3 million a year going out to start taking care of some of these street projects. And if you notice, this is, you know, $15, $16 million of projects that are up here. But right now, there's no funding. I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Could I just go back a page? The city welcome signs, the $28,000, does that include redesigning them? What is that money going for? A redesign or just replacing some of them? Or
For which one?
the welcome signs?
Those, yeah, that's balanced when we originally did the welcome signs in all the neighborhoods. That's just the balance that we have carried in case they needed repairs. They, you know, we talked at one point, you know, with lights and the whole bit. So that we've just left that balance.
Okay, because there's no sign indicating that you're in Riviera Beach when you come south past MacArthur Park, coming into Singer Island.
Okay.
There's no sign there. I think we should have spoken with Mr. Evans about this. I know he's aware.
Okay.
And we should have a sign there to say, hey, this is Riviera Beach, you know.
It would probably cost more than that, but if that's the case, we could add more down the line. But
Everything costs more in Singer Island.
Is there a sign?
well, we also do have
Is there a sign
$100,000 on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a sign coming off of I-95 at Blue Heron? It says, welcome to Riviera Beach.
I believe there is.
Madam Chair, if I may, that
Yes.
sign was actually damaged, and we had to take that sign down, but we're in the process of putting that sign back up. But yes, there was a sign when you get off 95.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but there is still the $100,000 for North Ocean Boulevard landscaping, so maybe that combined with the, you know, the sign money, you know, we could get that done. All right, the Marina project. Again, these are the same projects that you saw back in August. The top one is Dock E. The third one is Dock G. Those may fall off by the end of September. We're just waiting for our final reimbursement from Find, and then those two projects are done. Dock F, again, has one dock remaining to be installed. I will point out the ones, mooring fields, we did put money into FY 2022, but I understand there is a presentation on September 15th. Mr. Sprague will be back to talk to you how you'd like to actually proceed with the mooring fields. And then we have all the utility projects. We have a couple pages of the utility projects. These are not new projects. You've seen them all before. As you know, you quite frequently see resolutions moving the money around as, you know, as the costs change from side to side. But this plan does spend all of the money remaining that's available and has been programmed for capital projects for the utility district. So if I go to the very bottom, that's $66 million over the next 5 years. That does not count all of these unfunded projects. So it does not include the new water treatment facility, and again, the list of projects that are up here. So at some point, again, we will have to look to, you know, see that these projects start getting funded.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go
But
ahead.
then what is the water treatment facility project 20023, 17,761,1773? What is that money?
That's the American Rescue Plan money that you just
That is,
approved.
that is
last
the
night,
new,
yeah.
okay, so in that
Yeah.
case, that is the new.
Right, so that'll, again, we're hoping that that'll get us through the design and engineering phase and, at least cover through that.
What is the, and it says it's currently going, I'm not sure, what is the Garden Road Improvement Project?
Which one?
Garden Road Improvement. It's 18118. It's a series bonds, 336,000.
Yeah, I believe that there was a culvert there or something that they had to, go under the road. So it was new piping that they were putting in them. And that may be a county project
Yeah.
that's our share.
Yeah, that's a county project, and since it's impacting, since our infrastructure's in the way, we have to remove it and then pay to put it back. So that's the cost associated with it.
So it's a project that they have, but we have to remove our stuff, but we got to pay to put it back.
That is correct.
Okay. Is that typical?
Unfortunately, yes, with the state, the federal government, and the county, usually when if your utilities are in the way and they go to redo a roadway, you're gonna have to pay the costs associated with moving the item and then reconstructing it.
I see, so it's a part of a larger project that, okay. All right, very good.
And that concludes the capital projects presentation. If there are any other questions, if not, we can move to.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
I have asked, and in communication will pop up the slide really quick in regards to the capital improvements plan for the Community Redevelopment Agency. And I believe Mr. Scott Evans is on the line as well, and we can go over the CIP for the CRA.
Mr. Evans, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So before you do that, I want to ask a question relative to the American Rescue Plan. I know we took some action maybe a month and a half or two ago regarding amending the CIP. Did we decide to allocate the full amount all to capital, Mr. Sherman?
Yes,
The full 15?
the full 17, yes.
17, okay. And I guess that gets applied to the projects in any kind of sequential order, or how does that work?
Well, as I mentioned the night you adopted that resolution, we're going to have to get an interlocal agreement because the money actually comes to the city. And then we will, in essence, do it again through a drawdown. So when the district, as we get the agreement, that as the district spends those dollars, we will then, transfer the money over and reimburse the district for it.
Okay, all right, good enough, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Evans.
All right, Madam Chair, and if our Planning and Development Director, Mr. Scott Evans, can walk us through the capital improvements for the CRA.
Good evening. Yes, these are the CRA's capital dollars. Just confirming everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Okay,
Do
great.
do we have a?
So these are,
Hold on one second, Scott. Do we have this in this packet?
You do not have that. I can email that over.
Yes, yeah, because I don't have my glasses. I can't see it. Give us
Okay.
1 second, Scott. Let me get this up because I can't see it.
Did he say he emailed?
He's gonna email it right now.
Oh, he is, okay. So, yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Yep, I see it. Go ahead, Mr. Evans. Scott.
okay, these are the remaining capital dollars. So all of these projects that are currently listed are funded out of dollars that we have. So this would be, the first one is the Blue Lagoon project, which is already an existing project. And this is shown as going from 195 to 455. $100,000. And that would be a change that we'll be bringing to you in the coming month, which would allow them to proceed with starting construction of the Blue Lagoon project, which is located on the north side of Blue Heron, beside Avenue F. And that's just a project that has experienced, like all other construction projects, increased costs. So in order to make their funding work, they have requested that we increase the amount of assistance that we provide to them.
Madam Chair.
Someone's speaking.
Hello.
Yes, who's that?
Can I ask if he could repeat that, because I guess it was kind of a little choppy there, but I want to make sure I understood what we were changing as it related to the Blue Lagoon project.
Sure, go ahead, Scott. Could you repeat that for Councilman McCoy?
Certainly. So the Blue Lagoon project includes $195,000, which is a contribution to the construction of their building. And then it also includes an additional $260,000 in 2023, which would be a part of our entrepreneur program. And we're proposing to lease the other 2 spaces that are in the building. And then the additional $260,000 would help us build out the interior of the space so that we could then lease it under our entrepreneur new business program once that's approved.
Madam Chair, question.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans and Mr. Evans, now that we've decided to change course with the Blue Lagoon, it seems to me that this is no different than what we've done to the incubator project at the Dairyville location. Wouldn't we have to send that out for competitive solicitation now that, everything has changed about that? Because, now we're actually doing the building. I mean, can we build exclusively to give now one particular tenant preference?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
With respect to the project, the way and the relationship that was provided for in the discussions as well as the agreements, it was contemplated that, of course, we would bring some capital to the table to help facilitate the arrangement. In conversations with the prospective property owner and developer, that conceivably, in order to facilitate the project moving forward, as previously discussed, there would have to be additional capital that would be brought to the table. It is a deviation in the relationship. If it is something that the board chooses to go back to the drawing board, that obviously is something that you can do, is within your scope and within your right. But the challenge is that the reason that this project was delayed and the challenges associated with this project is the exponential increase associated with construction cost. And they have seen about a 30% increase in construction costs, and their ability to be able to move forward with the construction loan. There was not enough funding available, and the applicant couldn't qualify for the monies necessary. So in order to get this project, which has been on the CRA books for I think over 8 years, to get this thing up and operational, we knew that we had to deviate from what was previously contemplated. But it is a policy decision if the board chooses to move in that particular vein. The other things that we were looking to incorporate would be that, in fact, those 2 other incubator spaces would be an opportunity whereby we would help place persons there and generate revenue and have a arrangement whereby the same type of concept that we were looking at would work, but it would be something that eventually it would be like lease or rent to own, that there would be a situation where the ownership would ultimately move towards the other individual that was contemplated in the original agreement. So in a nutshell, it really depends on what the board's perspective is. If it's something that the board wanted to move forward and change, that can be done. If it's something that the board wanted to help facilitate this, it is going to require more involvement from the CRA to have this materialize. Mr. Scott Evans, is there anything else that I omitted as part of the conversations and discussions?
No.
Madam Chair.
Yes, wait, one second. Mr. McCoy, does it answer your question?
It answers some of it, but I guess I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, and I'm kind of at a loss trying to look at multiple items, but if I'm not mistaken, the item, the amount that I've seen on that CRA capital, well, let me put it on the CRA capital spreadsheet. So that's $455,000 over the next 2 years. I don't have a problem with leaving it in there, but you're correct, Mr. Jonathan Evans. We have to have a serious conversation because, I mean, if we're contributing $500,000, I'm concerned about what those terms are going to be, and it's nothing to the I guess the prospective person at Blue Lagoon, but I mean, we're spending $500,000. I just want to make sure that we're going about it in a fair process, and not only in a fair process, that we can understand when the organization has some reasonability to collect and what we're going to collect, at least with those other 2 units. It has to be something like we have to have a really good ironclad development agreement to make sure that this is worth the money for us to tie up, $500,000 over the next 2 years for a project when, I don't believe that that's what we originally had estimated that the cost would be.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
That's it.
All right, go ahead, Dr. Botel.
Mr. McCoy, is he done?
Yes, he's done.
Mr. Evans, as a consideration to people at home who might be watching this, could you just briefly describe what the Blue Lagoon project is?
So the Blue Lagoon project is a commercial development on Blue Heron that was intended to be a situation whereby the CRA would bring the asset or the property to the table, and the prospective operator was going to utilize a grant that was provided by the CRA and bring cash to the table to facilitate a construction loan to build a plaza type operation.
Oh, that's the Tony Sub, okay.
That is correct, Madam Chair. And so they would occupy one portion of the plaza, and then there would be 2 other spaces that would be available for small business opportunities, and they would in essence manage the relationship with the tenants, and ultimately that's how that project was supposed to come to fruition. Then fast forward to where we are and the discussions that we had, it's also contemplated, and Councilperson McCoy, in full disclosure, the capital that's being brought to the table, there is also some other financing mechanisms that we may have to participate by virtue of some type of an arrangement where we almost co-sign the note to facilitate the monies necessary to move forward with the construction of the facility. Scott, is that correct?
Yes, we've been talking about it with the BBIC. Right now, I believe that we will just have to sign a long-term lease for the 2 entrepreneurial spaces, and that should be all the commitment that's required. Okay. But we're still waiting on final confirmation from BBIC.
So, Madam Chair, once we get the specificities on the term sheets and we're a little bit clear on that, we will be able to provide that to the board. But this is putting the monies in the budget for the purposes of helping move it forward, but it still has to come back before you all before that money's ever let. So we will have all that worked out. This is just putting the monies in there based on the conversations we've had to be able to facilitate the development of the Blue Lagoon Plaza.
Yeah, and my question is that if we're putting this money in, why don't we get reimbursed for our part in this?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
As part of the arrangement, we're going to look at those options and bring those options before the board to consider. If there is more risk associated with that and the CRA is willing to take on, then there has to be some type of agreement where we're comfortable with, and that's going to be a policy decision that the board will have to make. So we'll try to outline kind of 2 or 3 options that you can consider and what the bank needs in order to facilitate this particular arrangement.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Evans, that does sound like a more viable option that we do long-term lease the other 2 spaces, because I can tell you, I've heard from so many people that always ask, is the CRA doing anything for startup space for a small business besides the one, location we have there on 27th and Broadway? And obviously, I really want to see that, the restaurateur can, really get in that space and get off, because I know that this has been, on for quite a while. And I would like to know that, well, not a question, but I would like to know that in the event that, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen, that we have first right of refusal if, after 2 or 3 years, they determine it's not anything that they can continue to do, that it reverts back to the CRA, and we can, then use that space as, as we decide further in the future. But I mean, so long as we have an opportunity to use those other 2 spaces for other, incubator spaces, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Very good. And one other additional question. I was looking at the Station 86 community room, and I thought the CRA funds couldn't be used for municipal facilities.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't hear your question.
I was looking at the line item of Station 86 community room, and I thought that the CRA funds could not be used for municipal facilities.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
they can be utilized for facilities and municipal facilities, and especially when we were looking at utilizing those monies to accommodate the space that would conceivably be lost with the Ambassador Center. So you can utilize it for municipal facilities within the CRA. That happened to be within the CRA area, and that was why that was programmed in. Madam Chair, Mr. Evans, if you can proceed through the other items that are contained in the capital project sheet.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
The 2600 Broadway, this is the building that we're looking to demolish very shortly. They'll be starting the interior of that building this month. And then FPL wants us to move some of the adjacent power lines. So before we actually knock down the exterior of the building, we're going to have to move some power lines. So that work is underway, which also leads, so the dollars in this are just a holding amount so that we can demolish it, replace it with some sod, and then we'll have some leftover dollars that we may need to apply as an incentive. And just to give you some more background on that project, the Lambert Advisory Group has completed an economic analysis of the site, and they will be looking to make a presentation to the CRA board in October to talk about how we can move this site forward and get the board's feedback on making sure it's the right vision for the city before we issue that to the private development community. The utility burial project is the third item, and the biggest cost under this item is for the FPL contract. And we're looking to bring the FPL portion of that contract to you in late November, early December. And once that contract's signed, then FPL will complete the work. And the only other, the additional thing that the city will be responsible for is to restore some of the right-of-way area, and of course to put in the power boxes, which will be replacing the cans or the overhead lines that are along the corridor.
Madam Chair.
The Renaissance
Hold on
housing.
one second,
Yeah.
Scott. We have a question.
Thank you. Before you leave that topic, could we do an analysis of the cost to bury the utility lines on the island, at least just up and down North Ocean Drive?
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
that would be something that would have to be explored by the city, on the city side.
Oh, right, they're not, sorry, that's right.
Yes, but that's something, if we were going to look at undergrounding utilities, we can look at getting a cost per mile or per linear mile, so we can look to do it if we do it throughout the city holistically, because it's contemplated as we look at the City Hall campus, around that campus and down Broadway, may be something that we look to bury. Well, we're obviously doing that on the CRA, but as we look at subsequent neighborhoods that are adjacent to campuses doing that. So we'll get a cost for linear foot or linear mile and lane mile, and then we'll bring that back to the board.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Scott Evans, can you give us a time frame again on that burial project? How long are we looking to actually have those lines buried? I know we spoke about
Well,
this.
it will, yes, sir. It will take about 2 years from the time that FPL, that their contract's approved by the board, and that's not only to bury the lines, but then to come back later and remove all the overhead. So if that time frame holds and we can get that contract before you in first meeting in December, then it would take 2 years from then till the final step, which is removal of the overhead poles and restoration of the sidewalks.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
The CRA Renaissance Housing Program, this has $1 million set aside, and this is a carryover. This is primarily for the new townhome project, which the CRA board has approved, which will be going on the north side of 11th Street. And the Avenue E Street dollars, this is the next line item down. This is $2 million that we've put aside for the redevelopment of Avenue E. And from the CRA's perspective, we think that the combination of potentially moving a portion of City Hall to the Broadway corridor, which also fronts on Avenue E, is a great opportunity not only to bring new facilities to Broadway, but also to do Avenue E Street at the same time. So hopefully these dollars, which have been waiting for participation of the city, hopefully we can put those together with either new dollars from the City Hall or from Utility District and Public Works to try and make that whole project, or at least a portion of it, move forward in the coming year.
Madam Chair, question.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Scott Evans, the CRA Renaissance Housing Project, which you said are the townhomes on 11th Street on the north side, we've already approved that. Is it some sort of, I guess, did we not already send off the entire $900,000 that was set forth, or is it going to be broken out over the 2 years? Is that what that is?
Yes, that's what it is. And the board did approve the expenditure of the $900,000 on that project, but that money is held in the capital projects budget.
But
So
I thought in looking at the development agreement that they needed the $900, I guess, towards down payment or something like that. Wasn't there something in there that we needed to give the 900 up front in the development agreement? I thought I don't see why it would be on our books if it seems like to me, if it's in the capital plan, I don't understand. Can you help me out with that? Because I thought the development agreement, it provided that we would give the 900,000 up front.
Madam Chair, if I may, Ms. Anita Jenkins as president can speak to that particular matter.
Okay, come up, Ms. Jenkins.
Good evening, Chair Lanier, Commissioners. And Mr. McCoy, to that point, the dollars were not to be expended until we had a closing, and we'll close once the construction loan is ready to close. So
Okay, thank you.
nothing has been expended by the city.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Ms. McCoy?
Yes, thanks.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Evans. Scott.
The next item is property acquisition, and this is showing $1.5 million. But this has actually already mostly been spent. We're waiting to close on the Miami sub-site and then to demolish that site. So these dollars would be reserved for that already approved action. But I will take this opportunity to update the board. There's been a lawsuit between a person who used to work there and I believe the operation, and that's been preventing us from clearing title to purchase the property. We were hopeful that it would be cleared already, but I guess they filed another motion to extend it.
What's the issue with the title?
That there's a lawsuit ongoing between the previous owner of the building and the former tenant. So it's not, doesn't have anything to do with us.
Hold on a second, Mr. Scott Evans. So we didn't know this before we bought this property?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
This is a dispute between the employer and the employee, and as a result of the claims that are being alleged, that it basically ties the property up. It's a pro se litigant as well, and the courts are usually more lenient when it comes to that. So we are hoping that this will resolve itself in the next, hopefully in the next 60, 75 days, but nonetheless, that's been the situation as a result of so it was something that came up as part of the closing process, and so we're looking to resolve this because the property owner does want to sell the property, but the employer and the employee are, fighting it out in court.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Scott Evans.
We also have set up a reserve we know that the build out of the event center is going to cost somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million as a contribution to help the new tenants to build out the space and to move in. So this dollar item held here is 400,000, which if combined with the dollars that the CDE currently holds, which is about 800,000, then that would make the minimum amount. So we are holding enough that we could begin the build out of the event center once the board's approved that agreement. The next item is the 2601 block redevelopment. This project came before the board several months ago, and it became this is the build out and the fixing up of the parking lot adjacent to the Dairy Bell, and it was proposed to be a new fountain, new hardscape with widened sidewalks, and some improvements to the corner of Broadway and Blue Heron. And the project came through as a phase 1 and a phase 2. And at the board meeting, the CRA board authorized the approval of the phase 2, but not phase 1. And when we went back to...
Mr. Scott Evans, hold on one second. I wanted to acknowledge that Commissioner Miller Anderson is here. She's on the dais. I don't know why I get that. I'm sorry, Mr. Evans. Go ahead.
Okay. So this 250,000 this project will come back before the board, but it is reserving enough money to fix up the parking lot, put in decorative lighting, enhance the sidewalk in front of the Dairy Bell site, and put up some fencing and some additional improvements. But the reason it was delayed is because when we looked at the board approved phase 2 instead at the meeting, and then when we met with the contractor, there was a lot of items that were in phase 1 that you couldn't do phase 2. So we've gone through a value engineering, and we've got the project now ready, and we'll bring that back before the board for your consideration. Originally the cost of the project was going to be 700,000, and the board had expressed they wanted us to try and spend less. So this is coming back. We believe the cost will only be 200,000, but this is just reserving enough that if you decide to approve the modified project, that we have dollars set aside for that.
So does this, Mr. Evans, event center build out, what does that include? I mean, give me some idea of what that means.
Once we find a tenant, and so we know what they're going to put in the spaces, then these dollars will be our contribution to all of the finishes that are required to be made. It won't cover all of the improvements, but for example, if the ground floor of the event center becomes a golf swing suite, then they'll have to come in, put in additional plumbing, put in new flooring, upgrade electrical, of course, all of the drywall, new ceiling, and likely a kitchen expansion and all the digital TVs. So it's all of the improvements that are made in the space. And we anticipate that those improvements would cost over $2 million, but that our contribution would be somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5.
Okay.
The last item is...
hold on a second, Mr. Scott Evans. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you. And just follow up, Mr. Evans, on the build out for that marina. Does that include the rooftop space as well?
Yes, that includes the rooftop space.
So time frame wise in regards to building that out. We have it budgeted. We're going to build out and prepare it down to a white wall so that we can have a tenant move in. Is that space something that we're going to utilize in the event that we don't have a tenant move in the next 12 to 24 months?
We could put in the flooring on the upstairs of the event center if the board wanted us to proceed independently. Of course, on the ground floor, the improvements will be, specifically and closely tied to what it ends up becoming. So that those dollars, if we tried to make some of those improvements, that likely that money would need to be, spent again when we did find a tenant, because they may not be able to use it exactly. But if we wanted to make some improvements now, we could put in the entire flooring system on the second floor of the event center if the board so desired.
I would just imagine that finishing that rooftop terrace would be a great option and amenity for rental space when we're using for weddings or anybody that wants to utilize the space, so that we can, in the interim, actually provide that to residents and renters for the marina. Because as of right now, just us finishing it down to a white floor is not going to benefit us until we actually get a tenant moved in, or we actually process something where we move forward with phase 2 development. So for the interim, if we're going to do any improvements, let's try to generate some revenue utilizing the improvements we're doing. So making it to a base where we can actually rent that rooftop space would look good for us and give us the opportunity where we can combine it with our marina ballroom and make it into a destination for families wanting to rent it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
I just was going to mention the last item, which is a contribution of the community room in Station 86. Of course, right now, the Clean and Safe Offices has that community room that is fairly well used, and we wanted to include this as an amenity for when Station 86 is relocated. And the CRA can contribute to certain projects as long as it's at the beginning of the project. The statute says the CRA can't come in later and pay for things the city originally planned to pay for, but this is a new project under development, and we can participate with them however the city council deems appropriate. My summary.
Very good. I have a couple of questions. For the Miami Subs property acquisition, I would like to have more information about what that issue is. I thought that was a done deal, and to hear that we haven't even gotten the title for the property, I did not know that. So if I can get some more information about why this is employer, whatever the deal is, how is that affecting us getting clear title? What is the time frame that we see in terms of us getting that? It was a large investment, and not to have the title is very troubling. So if you can provide the council with information in regards to where that is, time frame, timeline, and more details about how we got here. That's the first thing. The second one is the Blue Lagoon project. Was that project originally bid out for people to compete to get that project space?
Yes, that project was originally a P3 opportunity that this year, similar to what we're now developing for the 2600 site.
Oh, so the person who won the bid is the person that you're working with to be able to get the site developed?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. And
So, Madam Chair,
go ahead.
so that's good that you brought up that question, and that's exactly what I want to say. Now the elements are changing, and I mean changing significantly. Certainly, I wanted to make sure that we weren't running afoul about just basically taking on this financing role when materially what was bidded and won is not the same thing that we have today. And I don't have a problem with keeping it in the capital improvement plan, but I want to make sure that we have clear understanding about what happens, because I don't want to here next year that somebody comes in and say, hey, this materially changed and the solicitation should have went back out. But that's exactly why I asked that question earlier. And I think certainly I want to make sure that, we're not, aggrieving anyone that originally bidded on it, that, now the circumstances have changed. So I'm glad someone else is kind of at least cognizant of it. So thank you.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's it for me now. I just was having some issue with the other title for the Miami Subs project. But thank you so much, Mr. Evans, Scott Evans, for your presentation. Are there any other questions for Mr. Scott Evans in regards to the CRA capital funding projects? Thank you. Mr. Evans?
All right, Madam Chair, we'll go back to the PowerPoint slide. All right, the next section here is going to be with regards to the professional services for city administration. The first item up there is listed as to be determined as $50,000. We had those monies set aside last year for events, programs, economic development, etc. So we have set those monies aside for the purposes of any events or programs that we may want to do throughout the year, that there wasn't monies that were budgeted for those particular activities or programs. The next item is $125,000 associated with citywide branding. As previously discussed with the board, the importance of really looking at our branding, our marketing collateral, and how we look to celebrate our centennial celebration, but ultimately to come with a new brand, a new logo, and something that's trademarked and protected to protect the city's name, likeness, and image. That's roughly about the cost associated with a branding exercise that realistically takes about a year to complete. We did put monies in the budget for $25,000 associated with tourism and marketing associated with tourism, and promotional activities associated with that. So that's monies that we have in the budget. And then we've put aside $250,000 for centennial related activities, events, and programs. One of the things that we will be asking each of the board members to do as we get closer to the centennial celebration, and whether we do it once a quarter or however actually more frequent than that, to get each of the board members to be a host of an event or an activity as part of the centennial celebration, and that it's a moving, ever-growing event till we get to the point where we get to celebrate our 100th anniversary. So that's something that we're still building out some of the programs. COVID is actually, putting some challenges in place, but nonetheless, we've put monies aside for the centennial celebration. And for those folks that are at home that are wondering when we turn 100, it is September 29th of 2022. So that incorporates the monies that have been put aside for professional services related to city administration.
Mr. Evans, can we have a presentation? Certainly, the month of September is 99 years for the city. So if you can come back to the council, certainly by October, to provide us an outline. I know that you haven't fleshed out everything in terms of how we're going to celebrate our centennial, but to bring back an outline of how we see or envision the city celebrating its centennial.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, and that certainly is our intent, to get some feedback from the board and some thoughts in regards to how we can work collaboratively to celebrate our centennial. So yes, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Next item.
And Madam Chair, at this particular moment, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mr. Randy Sherman, our Finance Director.
Good evening again. What we have as our final item of discussion for this evening, is a discussion on wages. And I'm going to kind of go back and tell you how we got to where we are and where we currently are standing as far as employee wages. So I'm going to go back all the way back to 2012 as the city was coming out of the recession, right? At that point, employees were being furloughed for 48 hours for the fiscal 2012, okay? Firefighters took off 2 shifts, police officers took off 3 shifts unpaid, and then 8-hour employees were taking 6 days unpaid to balance the budget. Wages, including their steps, had all been frozen since 2009, and Riviera Beach was well known for having salary scales that were at the bottom of Palm Beach County. What that was leading to was the fact that police officers and firefighters were being, taken from other, from the city. After we hired them, we trained them, and then other communities were coming in and paying more and taking our employees. Again, the cause that was leading into this, one obviously was the economic recession that we had. The city at that point had one of the richest, if not the richest, set of pension plans in the state. Again, we had a 3-times multiplier. A lot of pension plans are 1.25, 1.5. The city's old pension plans were a 3-time multiplier, which meant you got 3% of your pay for every year that you were here as part of your pension. And then the city had a lot of outdated ancillary type payment systems that other communities had done away with, such as longevity, buybacks of sick and vacation, and the accrued time severance payments that we were paying. So at that point, again, coming out of the recession, the city made a commitment to its employees that over a number of years, over several contract periods, the city would work to elevate the employee wages to, equitable market levels of our peer and competitive government entities. So who are our peers? This is a list of the cities that we typically use. We use it when we look at police, we look at fire, and we look at all of our other employees. These are the individuals that we try to poach their employees, and they try to poach our employees, right? And again, we use this group because they're local. No one would have to move if they decided to, to move from one community to the other. So what we did is we went back to 2012, and we in essence said, okay, we started every union group, every group of employees at the bottom at the $1 mark. And what this graph shows are the changes in the wages for particular groups since 2012 through 2021. So I don't have a pointer, but the top line, the purple line there that tops out at 242, that is your PBA employees that we offered the 10% extra bonus if they had a BA or better. That was the last contract that they had. The line below that grows from $1 to 205, that is your non-BA or plus PBA employees. Those two numbers put your police officers in the top 25% in Palm Beach County. Okay? So their wages have grown from near the bottom to the top 25%. Now, the reason we are in the top 25% now is because we know the other communities are giving raises, which will then drop this group closer to the middle. The third line down, that is your IAFF employees. So those are your firefighters. And again, don't be concerned that one is at 205 and one's at 192, because again, that's just starting at $1, but they weren't all necessarily below market at the same levels. But your firefighters are also in the top 25%. And again, as that contract goes, they will, clearly move back towards the middle. The three lines clustered at the bottom, that is your non-represented employees, your SEIU employees, and your PMSA employees. Okay? So those have gotten the lowest raises over this 10-year period. You can see, you know, they pretty much track with each other as you go. The 130 at the bottom, that's your PMSA employees. The 132 are your non-represented employees. And the 147 is your SEIU employees, which includes the current contract that they just voted on Wednesday for passage, and will be coming back to the council for adoption on September 15th. So it's that bottom group that we're really focusing on here tonight, not necessarily PBA and IFF.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just for clarity, the PMSA is what, about 17 people?
Yes, 70, yeah.
So I have the right group in my head.
And we are in negotiations with that group, so I may not say certain things about PMSA. So again, as we talked about the fact of getting equitable wage scales, again, we had done an analysis of all the jobs in the city. This was the criteria. There was a point structure for every one of these criteria. And you may be rated high in one criteria, not so high in another criteria. But then again, based on your score, that then set the bands of which employees were getting paid at which pay grades. We updated the market study on the salaries. We went back, you know, we hired a firm, they came back in, they did a limited market study, quite a few positions, but, you know, not 100% of the positions. And I know you have the presentation and you can go through and look at these, but let me walk through the columns so you at least understand what the columns are. So obviously you have the job titles. The next three columns, those are the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum of our peers and competitors, okay? And it's also interesting when they have the range width, that means that's the spread between the minimum and the maximum, okay? So the top line, the maintenance worker, there's a 60% spread between the minimum and the maximum. The set of numbers off to the right, those are our current numbers, okay? So again, you have a minimum, and what we've done is we've compared our minimum to our peers' minimum. And then we have a midpoint, and then you have a maximum, and again, we compared the maximum to the maximum of the peers, and that's where you see those percentages. And if you look at our ranges, we try to be at 50%. So if your base salary is $40,000, your maximum would be 50% higher than the 40, so that would put it at 60,000. So that's how the 50%. So again, you know, you can see that, you know, we've tried to stick closer to the 50%. So again, I won't go through them, but, you know, they did all of these positions as part of their evaluation. Oops, too far. Okay, so at the end of the day, using all of these positions, you look at that very bottom line, you can see that our minimum salaries are off by about 7% from our peers, so that's our starting rates, and our maximum rates are off 12.7% from where our peers are. Again, you can see there's different percentages on different positions. So you look at the library director, you look at the maximum, that position is off 23.7% for a library director. But if you then come down, you know, 4 lines or so, which is the assistant police chief, we're only off 4.5%. Okay? So again, we have taken care of our firefighters, we've taken care of our police officers, and now what we're looking at are the other positions, you know, in the city. Because again, as we talk about equity, as soon as you raise a police officer, you need to raise a sergeant. When you raise a sergeant, you need to raise a major, or a captain. When you raise a captain, you need to raise a major. You know, you have to keep that compression going. You know, right now we have sergeants that are making more than captains because of the PBA contract. So that's why we undertook this, to kind of deal with all those compression issues. So again, going back to this slide, again, you can see they're clustered at the bottom. We just gave, came to an agreement with SEIU, which pushes them to that 147 rate. This is the results, really, of the SEIU wages, okay, in the negotiations that we had. We're raising the salary schedules 15%. Okay, that was the agreed upon. They've seen the schedule. They've signed off on the schedule. It really raises the schedule 15%. Doesn't mean every employee is getting 15%. That's just the schedule. What's happened in the past is we have given cost of living increases of 3%, okay? And then we've raised the scale 3%, which means if I was at the bottom, I'm still at the bottom, okay? Because all I did was just keep pace with the scale and not get placed up where I really should be, at the midpoint or higher. So part of the agreement that we have with SEIU is we're going to not only raise the scale, but now we're going to put people within that scale where they really should be. Now, I'll tell you, again, we've done that with fire, we've done that police, we've gone all the way back, and we put the individuals in the right steps. As I pointed out, back in 2009, everybody was frozen. So they could have been here for 5 years, but they were still in step 2 because they got frozen. So over time, we have moved those. And I want to say it was the 2014 contract. We actually gave people 2 steps every year so they could get caught up. So again, you take it, you spread it out over a number of years, and again, it's been 3 contracts to get those two groups where they need to be. The next
let me ask you a question about the SEIU contract, because I've gotten some calls from SEIU employees in regards to this contract and how the appearance that there may be some salary adjustments, but some positions, especially long-time positions, are not being able to come up to the amount that someone was here for 2 years is at that level. When you talk about, bringing employees from where they are to, the salary survey, some employees are being left out in terms of bringing them up to that status, and given their longevity, and because there's no longevity pay, they're still below where they should be in terms of other employees who've only been here for, 2 or 3 years. So that was something that was brought to me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of have some idea of how this works in terms of contracts. I see where it says gains and concessions, but how to ensure, and I know that this is a contract issue, how to ensure that employees, especially long-term employees, are being compensated at the same rate that other employees who may not have been here as long.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we spent probably 3 months with the union, employee by employee, making sure that we had the right dates, the right time of service, the right rate. So the union has signed off on every one of the employees. Sometimes it went back and forth on particular employees. Again, we only had 17 employees that they are currently over market. Okay? And again, that tended to happen when they were hired. They tended to be more of the newer employees. Because again, if you say the base is 40 and then we hired you at 45, well, the base is 40 and you've only been here a year and you're already at 45. So we tended to see it in those employees. We also saw it in a couple
and
employees.
I want to say, I think all 17 called me. So that's.
But again, the next slotting is in April. So, a lot of those 17 in April will then see, an increase. They may not see it now, but they will see it, as they go down the line. But the average increase, and it's funny how numbers tend to work out sometimes, because it just showed you, 12.7% was the average they were off. Slotting the SEIU employees was a 12.5% rate. Now, again, not everybody got 12.5%. There were some that got 20%, 25%, because that's, where they needed to be slotted. Because again, they've been here for years, and all they've done is bump along the bottom line. We have water plant operator that's spent 20+ years here, and he's always been a water plant operator, and he's at the bottom. It never had the opportunity to bump up because there's no steps in SEIU like there is in PBA and IAFF. There's no steps in PMSA. So again, unless the council is voting it and moving them, they're always going to be at the bottom. But the average ended up being 12.5%.
But how do we rectify that?
And that's what this contract does. It says, yeah, you've been here for 20 years. You shouldn't be at the bottom. You should be over here.
Okay.
So that employee is not a 12.5% employee. That employee is a 20+% employee that's, getting, a decent raise. And again, as part of that, the concessions where longevity is now in their base. So when that 12.5% is over and above the longevity that they have. So again, I've got my base salary, I have my longevity, now I'm getting another 12.5% over that, because that longevity only kicks in every 4 years. This adjusts it annually and accounts for that annually. But again, longevity again is in the base. So the fact we're not gaining anything as a city by doing this, because again, they're getting paid the same amount plus. The buybacks, we're no longer going to have that buyback of sick and vacation time. And that's primarily because sick and vacation time is going to go away as we transfer more liberal, PTO type program. So as we looked at this, and looking at the other individuals, what we were looking for the T1 and T2, which are your department heads, your managers, your assistant department heads, is the same program, okay, to keep pace with, the rest of the employees. So again, slotting, what that does is 9 employees do get redlined.
Right, and I think my concern here, and the concern of the employees, that there are new employees who are making more money than someone who's been here 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be rectified. That's just not fair for a person to walk in the door to make more than a person been here 20 years.
That has been a problem. Because I get that, I want X amount. I go, I've got, a customer service rep that's been here 5 years. I can't pay you more than that individual. This system will equalize that and get that to balance. Again, it actually does create equity in the system. And again, it's because people have been hired at an above market rate, and now, we're going to put it. So no one is losing any money. They're just going to be redlined until the scales catch up to them.
I just want to make sure that the city is in line with ensuring that our long-term employees are compensated for the time that they've been in this job, and the fact that, if you're going to pay a new employee a certain amount of money, then it should be across the board.
Yeah. Well, again, like SEIU has 180 employees, and only 17 ended up getting nothing.
Yeah, I just consider that 17 too many.
Now, when you look at the T1, T2 employees, I pointed out SEIU, it was 12.5%. These employees, if you plug them all in, it would actually be 14.4%. What we'd like to do is cap it at 12.5%. So again, an employee that's scheduled to get 6% would get 6, they'll be 100%. An employee that's supposed to get 18 would only get 12.5. An employee that's supposed to get 25 would only get 12.5. And we would cap it for this group of employees. And then again, it would catch up, at later times. Doing that, again, puts us on the same, those employees on the same schedule as the SEIU employees. We would have to come back, we would, come back and amend the ordinance on the longevity. We would phase out the buybacks like we are with, the other groups. And again, this group of employees would go to the PTO. Now, I will tell you, PBA does not have longevity. They haven't had longevity in almost 20 years. The firefighters agreed that there is no longevity for new employees. So, every group is heading in the same direction to get these scales up to market. Now, for the balance of the non-affiliated employees, which again is a very small group, it's like PMSA.
Let me ask you a question about that. Let me ask you a question about how is it that new employees, someone who walks in the door is paid over the range? How is that possible when that's not the range?
It's just the fact that they're walking in and we're poaching them from other places, and they're coming and saying, you're behind the scales. In order for me to come, you got to pay me more than your current scale and move me up, the ladder. So as you're trying to hire these people, and again, we know that the inequity is there for the longer-term employees.
Right. That's my concern.
And again, this is trying to stop that and get everybody on equal footing. For the non-affiliated, non-T1, T2 employees, these are effectively equivalent to SEIU employees. They just have like confidentiality criteria, and there's certain conditions that they can't be in a union. So again, for example, my employees that see wages all the time, and those, I can't have them in a union and looking at everybody else's wages. So they're a confidential employee, and they're really in this group. Okay, it's just the nature of their position.
About how many is that?
There's only a couple of dozen.
Okay.
So you'll see them in HR, finance, city administration, where you're dealing with things that really, need to be more. So again, this group, when you go through the same process, it's only one employee that gets redlined. Their average is 10.3. So again, if we cap this group at the 12.5, that really takes care of most of the employees. There's a couple that are more than 12.5. Possibly even here, we just do the same with this group that we did with SEIU and not have a cap because it's a fairly small group. But then again, we would come back and, and do the longevity and the buybacks and that. So that would get this group really the equivalent to the SEIU group, and they'd be up at that 147, and then again, so would the T1 and T2. So try to again cover that 12% under market that, that we see from the analysis. And I believe that's the last slide. So I'll turn it back to the manager.
Very good. Mr. Evans?
So, Madam Chair, what we'd like to do as part of the discussion with the board and certainly bring this item back to ultimately get the board to execute, what is necessary to facilitate addressing some of the compensation issues. One of the things that I will also be doing is making sure that our Labor Council looks at the compensation strategies, the philosophies, the rationale behind the study to ensure that it's fair and equitable and consistent with the compensation strategies that are provided for in best practices, as well as we don't want to have a situation where we're unfairly compensating persons, below or above or what have you. So making sure that's uniform and consistent. And so we will be bringing this back to you all. There is monies that are programmed in the budget that look to resolve these issues that were articulated by Mr. Sherman. But after we have that study reviewed and then we bring that back, there will be, elements of that will come back to the board. I am not going to modify the ranges or the wages or anything at this particular moment, but I will be bringing it back probably sometime in the early part of the fiscal year, because the longer we in fact delay, then the employees don't see that in their paycheck. And so one of the things that we do want to do is bring that back pretty quickly. We just want to make sure that everything is above board, everything is copacetic and reviewed by the appropriate legal minds as it relates to the rationale, the methodology. And we know that as soon as it goes into place, we want to make sure that the board knows that it's been vetted appropriately. So we just wanted to articulate what the concerns were and that your folks that are your T1 and T2 are significantly under market, and we have some issues, especially in the police side, with regards to some of our captains and majors and the like. And so
Right.
we are going to work through those things and bring that back.
Let me ask a question. Why would an employee be redlined, that first bullet?
Excuse me?
Why would an employee be redlined? That, I saw that on the first bullet of that slide, Mr. Sherman, and it said, one employee redlined. What does that mean?
Right.
Why is that?
So you'll have a situation where, let's say, Jonathan's been in the organization for 25 years, and your pay band, right? Your minimum and your maximum, the way it's usually formulated is it takes 10 years to get to the midpoint, and 20 years you should get to the top of the range. If I stay over that 20 or 30-year mark, there's a situation where I have exceeded what the range is for my position. Now, if I move up into another position, then my range changed. But if I stay, let's just say, as a grounds maintenance worker 1, and I stay there for 30 years, at some point that you hit that point where most government entities redline you and say, okay, you've already exceeded the maximum. We're not going to continue to pay over what the maximum is for a grounds maintenance worker 1. Now, some of the things that agencies look at, and you can look at other agencies. Some agencies say, and we used to do that, say, okay, persons would get additional benefits, whether it's additional sick time or additional vacation time or some other benefit in lieu of compensation because you were at that maximum. So there is those few and very few situations where persons are redlined, or a situation where you have a person that may be moved from one position to another position. So I was a grounds maintenance worker 1. You now remove me to a trainee because, let's say, for some other reason that position is no longer available. You move me to a trainee. Well, I'm already above what a trainee is, so I'm above the range to start off, and you hold my salary harmless. So you have multiple situations as to why you would have persons in those particular situations, or even, and what we've seen, it even sometimes where we see it's an upgrade for a person, and they are already making X in one department, and then they go to another department when the other department's position may be lower as far as where their starting salary is, and you want to make sure if it's a lateral move that you bring that person in at least to where they are or a little bit above. So you may have somebody that was making $25 an hour, and the position bottom is the starting is 15. Well, they would come in at 27. So maybe if somebody sees, hey, that person came in at $27 and the bottom of the range is 15, but they've got years of service that are credited towards where they make, because you want to make sure you make them whole. So there's those situations and circumstances, and that's why Mr. Sherman was talking that it really did take 3 months for us to go through basically person by person to make sure their days were correct. Now, one of the things that's incorporated with SEIU, it doesn't allow for the system that the SIU voted on. The longer you're in that position, the further away you would be from the person that started at the bottom. So if both of us came in at $15 an hour, like right now, the way the system is now is that the person that started and has been with the organization for 5 or 6 years may have maybe $1 between them, the new person. But what this new system does, it gives them actual credits for years in the seat, and so it incrementally gives them a little bit more to separate the compression. So we have a specific situation where I can remember where we have one person that's at 46 and the other person that's been there for 10 years is at like 52. Well, that person at 52 is going up to 61, and this person that's at 46, they're already above, so they're going to get redlined, so they're not going to see an increase maybe for a year or two. So it's going to create that separation for that person that's been in the seat longer.
Okay. All right, very good. So, yeah, very good. So what do we have left here?
That's the last part of the presentation we have, and we just wanted to share that with the board and obviously come back, but we did want you to know that the monies are set aside in this budget to be able to address those issues, similar to how the other challenges with regards to compensation has been addressed in the collective bargaining agreements. Also, we're in negotiations with PMSA, and we plan to handle them the same situation that we've handled the other collective bargaining units, to make sure that there's equity amongst the compensation philosophy that we deploy as an agency.
Very good.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So, Mr. Evans, in the event that we cannot provide the full 7% at that minimal point, is there a plan to gradually increase the compensations?
If you can repeat your question again, Councilman?
If we can't provide that full 7% minimum increase, do we have a plan that we can gradually increase that over the next few years so that it doesn't put too much impact on our general fund?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Councilperson. Our intent is when we do come back with the board to give you some options that look at, if you wanted to take it as an incremental step, you can certainly do that, or if you wanted to do it all at once, you can do that. But yes, we will be able to provide that to the board.
And follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
And just those options, Mr. Evans, because that's just the biggest concern, because we just know the impact on the general fund, but we want to get our employees to the level that's comparable to our peers as quickly as possible. So what is going to be the quickest, most efficient and effective way to do it without, desperately affecting that general fund, because we understand all the tools that goes to when it comes to our bond rating, when it comes to our reserves, when it comes to everything else. So I'm just giving both of those options would be great. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So where are we as far as budget workshops? Is this the last one?
This is the last one until we bring the budget document to you all for first reading on September 8th.
8th, correct.
So where's the portion where we go over the department budgets, each of the department budgets, like for legislative? I haven't seen that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't that last time you did that?
Did I miss that? I didn't see it in the PowerPoint.
The legislative, the budget for the elected officials, we did the departments yesterday, but we didn't get into the legislative because we kept the budgets the exact same for the elected officials.
But you all didn't do the line by line, even in those departments. Usually we have the line by line for, all the departments where we have a line by line. Mr. Chairman, you know what I'm talking about? Yes, you do.
I do, and you, yeah, it was a slightly different approach this year, but let me send out the legislative, because again, you're all the same.
Yeah. No, we're not.
I can send those out.
No, we're not. Not all the time.
Well,
But I may be this year.
So. I've set yours at the same because I wanted to confirm that you wanted to continue to do what you did. But I will send it out, and we can tweak it. But the bottom lines won't change.
So
but
everybody's, I know a lot of them did not change it, nothing really was impacted. So what we did last year, for the most part, is what it will be line by line from last year, for the most part.
And Madam Chair, if I can.
Yes, go ahead.
What we can also do, just to provide additional clarity and do it in a transparent fashion, we can bring it at the meeting at the 8th and just make sure that the board does bless it and says, hey, you've looked at your legislative budget and it's done so appropriately. So we can have a presentation.
That would be good. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, sir.
that sounds really interesting to hear Councilwoman Miller Anderson say that, and I got beat up last night for bringing up the exact same question. That's not how it's been presented in the past, and I'm almost certain, because I looked at the budget document a few weeks ago that we reviewed in 2020, because I can specifically remember I was in my hotel in Washington, D.C., and I still have the paperwork, but that is exactly what I said last night, and there seems to have been some concerns with other members when I brought that question to Mr. Evans as to that's not how it's been presented before in the past, in citing the same reasons that Councilwoman Miller Anderson said. So at least I know I'm not alone. But my question, Mr. Evans, is the dollars, I think you said some time ago, maybe about 3 months ago, we got the $10,000 from Ashbridge, and that was going to be distributed to the members' community benefits. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councilman.
So is it in this 2020 fiscal year?
That is correct. It's in this fiscal year, and it will be carried forward to, well, it's in the 2021. It will be carried forward to 2022.
Okay, but is it available for us now?
Yes, sir. It is available now.
And I guess without any kind of legislative direction, we don't have the same restrictions as the dollars that was associated with waste management, because if I'm not mistaken, I think someone brought up last night using community benefit. Oh, Dr. Botel brought up last night, I believe, using possibly our community benefits for the Racial Equity Institute. And if I'm not mistaken, when I read the resolution in the contract for waste management, we could not use community benefit dollars in lieu of a regular operating expense, which to me, that would be training and development or something of that sort. Is that correct, Mr. Sherman, regarding the use of waste management dollars?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
He wants you to ask the question again, Mr. McCoy.
So the waste management dollars, are we prohibited from using that for regular operating expenses associated with the city and its operations, such as to go towards training and development for employees?
Yeah, it's intended to, to go to, programs that, nonprofits that, are doing things that to, better the city, not for operational, costs. We have seen it be used, where for landscaping, donate to a parks program or something like that, but not for normal admin, administrative costs.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
Just 1 second. Let him finish. Go ahead, Mr. McCoy.
All right. And I do recall hearing that, but Mr. Evans, I just want to make sure the bunnies from Ashbrook won't have the same specific prohibitions and restrictions.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead.
I would encourage the board to utilize the same practices that you do for that particular monies. It's just clearer for the purposes of auditing sake, and any deviation from that, I think, just lends itself to an opportunity. So we would prefer that it would be utilized in the same particular form and fashion that you utilize your community benefits.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, sir. Dr. Botel? You got it. So back to Mr. McCoy's question about that big check we got that night. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. McCoy? The check that's supposed to have went to the commissioners for?
No. It doesn't go to the commissioners. Hold on. I didn't say that.
Oh.
It goes to our community benefit account.
Well, right. So that is what you're talking about, that check from that night?
Correct.
So, yeah, I forgot about that. Who gave that money to the community benefits program?
Ashbrit, our waste man, or not?
Yeah, they're a debris removal.
Debris hauler.
Yeah, debris.
Okay. Very good.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And Mr. Evans, I was just doing a follow-up. Let me check these notes. Didn't we already budget for last year for REI training when we decided that we were going to ask executive staff to take that training, and we just didn't complete it because COVID hit at that time?
That's correct. We were going to send persons to a training session that was available. When we looked at the cost for hosting it, I think it was well over $20,000 in regards to hosting. So I think what we were looking to do is to attend it, and the cost would be significantly cheaper. And so we're looking at all options associated with that. We're going to do it. It's just which form or fashion is the
best fashion.
Best, yeah.
And I know with COVID coming in, it would have been possible to get more employees to do the training if we brought in a facilitator and on site, or even working with the school district, because those are discussions that we've had in the past. But whatever way that we can kind of move in that direction this year, that'd be the best way to do it, to get that training done. So I'm sure you're on top of it. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Any other questions in regards to any of the items listed on the presentation for this evening? If not, meeting is adjourned.
Yes. It's a little light out.